Welcome to the 2014 Intramural Men's and Women's Softball Captain's video. This video will take you through rules and regulations of the Intramural Sports Program, as well as rules for the 2014 Men's and Women's Intramural Softball season. The eCheckup to Go program consists of an online confidential alcohol assessment with an intramural sports incentive. If your team gets 75% of its final roster to complete the assessment and send the verification to Intramural Sports, your team will receive a refund of its registration fee. This refund will be processed at the end of the 2014 softball season after the conclusion of playoffs and will be processed to the university bill of the team captain. Details for this incentive are available on the Intramural Sports website through Recreational Services as well as on imleagues.com. The Intramural Sports staff consists of the Director of Intramural Sports, Tommy Shore, Graduate Assistants Matt McCarthy and Drew Dunlay, and 9 student supervisors who are pictured here. If you, at any point during your participation in intramural sports, have questions about intramural softball or anything related to the intramural sports program, please find one of these intramural sports staff members. They will be more than happy to answer your questions and get you the information that you need. Our registration website for intramural sports at the University of Iowa is imleagues.com. If you've made it this far in the registration process, you are somewhat familiar with this site already, but this site also includes league announcements as we get going with intramural softball. Once you've passed the captain's quiz and have created your team, you can start doing roster additions through the imleagues.com website to build your roster to the minimum player requirement. Throughout the season, you can also make roster additions and adjustments on imleagues.com. Once registration is over, we will post schedules on imleagues.com, and you can find them at any time by accessing your team's homepage. For intramural softball or any intramural sports events, you can find sport rule information sheets by visiting imleagues.com, clicking on that sports homepage, hovering over the sport icon on the left as shown on the screen, and clicking the handbooks and manuals link once you hover over that icon. Again, you can find sport rules and information sheets for any of our sports and events on imleagues.com through this method. And once we get going with intramural softball and games start being played, you can find updated standings and when we get into the playoffs, updated brackets for the intramural softball season. Some responsibilities we have of you as team captains are to make sure your teammates are eligible first and foremost. Additionally, you need to make sure that your teammates know sport and program rules and regulations. Violation of our policies or our rules are not permitted, and it is not a viable excuse for someone to simply say he or she did not know that rule or that policy. All participants are responsible for knowing the program and sport rules and regulations. If we have to contact your team for any reason from the Intramural Sports office, you will serve as our contact for your team, and we will get a hold of you either via email or by phone. As I discussed before, you can make roster additions on imleagues.com, and in order to be guaranteed to be on the roster that night and be eligible to play that night, players must be added to a team's roster by 2 p.m. the day of the game for weekday games and 7 a.m. on Sunday for Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening games. You can continue this process through the quarterfinal round of the playoffs, at which time rosters are locked and you can no longer add players to your roster. But this, like I said, this process continues through 2 p.m. or 7 a.m., the roster addition deadline, the day of your team's quarterfinal game. As team captain, make sure to check imleagues.com frequently to make sure your roster is current and does not have any errors. A lot of times there will be participants whose status change within the university. They drop classes and are no longer a student or leave the university, leave their job at the university and are no longer eligible. So as a team captain, it is your responsibility to stay current with your roster and make sure you're checking that everything is correct. If you need to drop a player from your team, you can do so by completing a player drop form, which is available outside our Intramural Sports office on the main deck of the fieldhouse, on imleagues.com, and on the Intramural Sports website through Rec Services. Once you complete that form, you can submit it to our office via the drop box outside our office in E216 Fieldhouse or you can scan it and email it to us at intramural-sports@uiowa.edu. Eligible for participation in our program are University of Iowa students, faculty, and staff members. In addition, spouses or legally married partners of students, faculty, and staff members are permitted to play but must play on the same team as their eligible spouse. Additionally, a player may only represent one team in the men's league or one team in the fraternity league or one team in the women's league. You cannot play on more than one single gender team. If you enter a second team on a men's team or a women's team, you are ineligible for the remainder of the season, and any team found to be using ineligible players on the roster will forfeit any games in which that player participates. So again, as team captain, make sure that you are checking your roster and making sure everybody is eligible and everything is correct. A current intercollegiate athlete cannot participate on an intramural team in his or her intercollegiate sport or a related sport. For this purpose, that applies to intercollegiate baseball and intercollegiate softball. Any players on the intercollegiate baseball or softball team are ineligible for participation in intramural softball. Former intercollegiate athletes in baseball and or softball must be at least 2 full semesters removed from appearing on a Division I roster to participate in intramural sports in intramural softball. So if somebody played baseball or softball for the Iowa Hawkeyes, that person must sit out 2 full semesters before being eligible for participation in intramural softball. And in regards to sport club athletes, no more than 2 members or coaches of a related sport club are allowed to participate on the same intramural team. When you arrive at the Hawkeye softball complex for your scheduled game, all players must present a university ID card to the supervisor on duty to check in prior to each game. If you do not have an ID, you will not be allowed to play, and there are no exceptions to this. So captains, please remind all of your players to bring their university IDs for every game. Anyone caught misusing an ID, using a UI ID that's not theirs, or allowing their UI ID to be used for someone that's not them, is subject to suspension from intramural sports. We reserve the right to discipline the individual supplying the ID as well as the team captain. So 3 parties can be suspended from intramural sports if someone is caught misusing a UI ID. So make sure that your players are using their own IDs and not giving their IDs to somebody else to use improperly. If we have any incidents of this, these will also be passed along to the Dean of Students office, as it is a violation of the Student Code of Conduct for misuse of an ID. When you play, sportsmanship is our biggest expectation and the priority of our program here in intramural sports at the University of Iowa. We expect all of our teams to display good sportsmanship at all times towards opponents and towards intramural staff members and officials. Our officials will rate a team's sportsmanship on a scale of 4 being excellent down to 1 being poor, just like a GPA. Both teams will start at a 2.5 rating and either earn their way up to a 3 or a 4 or earn their way down to a 2 or a 1, but cannot stay at a 2.5 rating for that game. If you get a lower sportsmanship rating, a 2 or a 1, if you receive a 2, you will be notified via email that you need to improve your sportsmanship. If you receive a 1, the team captain will be suspended from participation in intramural sports and must meet with the intramural sports administrative staff to discuss the team's sportsmanship and how it can improve. We will not tolerate unsportsmanlike conduct as a part of our program. Our officials and our softball umpires are providing a service to you, allowing you to play intramural sports, and we expect that you will treat them with respect so that everybody can enjoy their experience out at intramural softball. Your team must maintain a 2.5 or better average to be eligible for the playoff bracket, and this is regardless of your win-loss record. You can win every game you play, but if you do so acting like poor sports, you will not be included in our playoff tournament. Any participant that participates in a fight will be suspended from all recreational services activities for at least 1 calendar year. And again, this will be passed along to the Dean of Students' office for possible further university sanctions. If any player is ejected from an intramural softball game, that player will be required, along with you as the team captain, to meet with an intramural sports staff representative. Both participants will be ineligible to participate in any intramural event until after the meeting. In most cases, the captain is suspended after the meeting takes place, but any ejected player for unsportsmanlike conduct will be suspended at least one additional game following the ejection. Games are officiated by student intramural officials, and in this case, in intramural softball, intramural umpires. All umpires are trained by the intramural sports staff, and again, we expect you to treat the officials with the respect you receive from them during the game. If you make an error on a ground ball or a throwing error or something like that, our officials aren't going to yell at you. Likewise, if you don't agree with one of their calls and you think they made a mistake, we expect that you will not yell at them. They will treat you with the same respect that you treat them. And again, sportsmanship is the priority of our program, and we will not tolerate participants yelling at our officials. If you are interested in being an umpire for the intramural sports program, you can attend our intramural softball umpires training meeting, which will take place on Sunday, March 9th at 12 p.m. at the Hawkeye Softball Complex press box at the corner of 1st Avenue and 2nd Street in the Coralville, Iowa City border, across from Old Chicago and Walgreens. The location of this officials training may change depending on the weather, in which case it will be held at the field house in room 201. So again, if you are interested in looking for the intramural sports program as an intramural softball umpire, we encourage you to attend this training and become a part of our program. We schedule intramural softball games with the intention that they will be played, and we want to do everything we can to make sure they are played. Teams not ready and at the game site within 10 minutes of the scheduled game time shall forfeit. The result of this is a $35 forfeit fine charged to the team captain's U-bill for forfeit of this game. If you still have games remaining and you play the remainder of those games, the team captain will be refunded the forfeit fine once the season has ended. If you forfeit your last game of the regular season and you do not have any playoff games, or if you forfeit out of the playoff tournament, you will not have a chance to recover that forfeit fine. If you know your team can't make it on a certain night, you can default. What a default does is it gives us a chance to contact the other team, tell them they don't need to show up, talk to our officials, tell them they've got a game off, and we can adjust accordingly. The first time you do this, there's no fine. We appreciate you letting us know, and we can adjust accordingly. The second time this happens, now we've got a trend of games not happening that we want to happen. So to try and discourage this, there's a default fine the second time your team defaults. That fine is 25% of the registration cost, fine to the team captain's U-bill with no chance of recovering that fine. The third time it happens, now we've got a bigger problem, and we will fine the captain to his or her U-bill 50% of the registration fee cost on top of the 25% that was already fined to the team captain. Again, we want games to happen, so we want to discourage teams from not showing up for their scheduled games. We understand things come up and things happen once in a while, which is the first time you default, there's no fine. In order to default, you must declare that by 2 p.m. the day of the game for weekday games, or 7 a.m. on Sundays for Sunday games, via email to matthew-mccarthy@uiowa.edu, or by phone by calling the Intramural Sports Office at 319-335-9292. If there is a misinterpretation or misapplication of the rule, you may protest this out at the game site. However, you cannot protest a judgment call. So whether or not somebody was safe or out at first base is not, or any base for that matter, is not protestable. However, if the umpire says you're starting with a 1-2 count when it's supposed to be starting with a 1-1 count, you can protest that. To do so, you must call a timeout immediately and tell the umpire that you want to protest that misinterpretation or misapplication of the rule. The sports supervisor will come over, make a ruling on the situation. If you still disagree, you can tell the sports supervisor that you want to play the remainder of the game under protest, and the next business day following the game, by noon, you must submit your written protest along with $5 to the Intramural Sports office. The director of Intramural Sports will rule on your protest. If the protest is upheld, you will receive a refund of your $5, and the game will be replayed from the point of the protest. If your protest is not upheld, we will keep the $5 and the game will stand as was played. Once registration concludes, we will make our schedules for the 2014 men's and women's intramural softball season. Those schedules will be posted on imleagues.com by Thursday, March 13th, and games will begin on Monday, March 24th, which is the Monday following spring break. Again, this is weather permitting. Once we get going with the intramural softball season, we will post all results and standings on imleagues.com, and the top 2 teams in each 4-team division will qualify for the weekend playoff tournament, which is scheduled for Saturday and Sunday, April 26th and 27th, 2014, weather permitting. Intramural softball games will be played at the Hawkeye Softball Complex, which was talked about earlier, on the Iowa City and Coralville border across from Old Chicago and Walgreens. And alcohol and tobacco are not permitted inside the complex or in the parking lot. This will be strictly enforced by both the intramural staff and University of Iowa police. Intramural softball games will consist of 7 innings, or 6.5 if the home team is ahead going into the bottom of the 7th, or a 50-minute time limit. No new inning will start after 50 minutes. However, if an inning is already started, it can continue past that 50-minute time limit, and the game will be finished once that inning ends. The only exception to this is if a game is tied after 50 minutes, we will continue to play extra innings until that game is decided and then the tie is broken at the end of a complete inning. A game will become official after 5 innings, or 4.5 if the home team is ahead. So if there's inclement weather and we've made it through 5 innings of your game, that will be official and the score will stand regardless of how many innings are played after that. There is a 15-run mercy rule in effect after 4 innings. If one team is ahead by 15 or more runs after 4 innings, or 10 or more runs after 5 innings, that game will end at that time. When you're playing intramural softball, you may not participate wearing metal spikes or cleats. This will be checked by the umpires prior to the game and monitored by them throughout the game. 12-inch softballs will be used for all games in our leagues, and you as players must supply your own gloves and bats. We have a very, very limited supply of low-quality equipment that we collect through Lost and Found, but as far as equipment for you guys to use, you need to provide your own equipment. And all bats that are used must be approved by the Amateur Softball Association. Teams will be comprised of generally 10 players in the field. However, 8 players must be present to start a game. Again, 8 players must be present to start a game. That means they're checked in, they're ready by the scheduled game time or 10 minutes after. You can bat a maximum of 12 players in the batting lineup, but you can only have 10 players in the field at a time. When you come up to bat, you will start with a 1-1 count, 1 ball, 1 strike. A foul ball on a 3rd strike results in a strikeout. When the pitcher throws a pitch, the legal pitch must have a minimum arc of 6 feet, so it must go above 6 feet and must stay at its highest point below 12 feet on its way to the plate. If teams are hitting home runs, a 3 over-the-fence home run limit per game will be instituted. However, if both teams have 3 home runs, each team can continue to hit more home runs over the fence, but that difference between teams cannot be more than 1 home run. So if you're tied at 3 over-the-fence home runs each, the next team to hit can hit 4, but if you get a 5th while the other team still has 3, that will be recorded as an out. and the infield fly rule will be applied in all applicable situations. Substitutes must bat and play at least 3 defensive outs before they can be taken out of the game. So, if you cannot just substitute somebody to hit and then have them go sit back in the dugout while the rest of the team goes out into the field, they must bat and play 3 defensive outs. A courtesy runner may be used for injured players, however, that must be declared to the umpire prior to the at-bat, unless the injury occurs after the at-bat while the player is running the bases. The courtesy runner will be the player who recorded the last out or a player who has not entered the game. A partnership the Intramural Sports Program has is with Buffalo Wild Wings to sponsor the Intramural Sports Points Championship. What this consists of is a point system that goes on throughout the year, and points are awarded to each team that participates in each sport based on that team's finishing position. To accumulate points throughout the year towards your team standing and towards the championship, you must keep the same team name throughout the year in all the sports you participate in. So the more sports in which you participate, the more points your team is going to have as long as you keep the same team name. At the end of each academic year, we award champions in the men's, women's, fraternity, sorority, and co-rec divisions. So there's 5 champions, and those team champions are awarded a championship trophy, a $100 gift card to Buffalo Wild Wings, and a Buffalo Wild Wings champion t-shirt for each participant on that team. If you are a captain looking for more players, or you are a free agent looking for a team to play on, you can attend, and we encourage you to attend, the free agent meeting, which will be held on Tuesday, March 11th at 2 o'clock p.m. in room 201 of the Fieldhouse. At this meeting, free agents can meet each other to form a team, or captains can meet free agents to pick them up and get them added to their rosters. We want everybody interested to be able to play intramural softball, so we will hold a free agent meeting on Tuesday, March 11th at 2 o'clock p.m. If you're going through the registration process and all the divisions listed on imleagues.com are full, we will hold a waitlist meeting on Wednesday, March 12th at 2 p.m. in room 201 of the Fieldhouse. At this meeting, waitlist teams that have completed their registration requirements, except for being able to choose a division because they are full, will allow them to choose a division and pay here at the Fieldhouse for their intramural softball team. We want to get as many teams in our leagues as possible, so we will hold a waitlist meeting on Wednesday, March 12th at 2 p.m. As a part of the Intramural Sports Program, we have a Friday night series of events. These are free single night events that take place on Friday nights throughout the school year. We have 2 remaining events: Inter 2 Water Polo at the Campus Recreation and Wellness Center on March 7th, and Late Night Softball, Co-Rec, on April 25th. The late night softball tournament starts at 8 o'clock and runs through the night as long as we need to go to finish the tournament. And again, these are consistent co-rec teams participating in that tournament. All Friday night series events are free, like I talked about, so check out imleagues.com to find out more information about those events. Now that you've watched the captain's video, you need to pass the captain's quiz on imleagues.com. Once you've done that, you can name your team and start to add players. Add players to your team, they must pass the players quiz, and once you get the minimum number of players on your team, which for intramural softball is 8, you can pay the registration fee. The registration fee will be paid online through imleagues.com via PayPal and will not be accessible until 8 a.m. on Monday, March 10th. So during the pre-registration period, you can take the captain's quiz and get players added to your team roster, and then beginning Monday, March 10th at 8 a.m., you will be able to pay the registration fee and select your division, which includes your day and time of your regular season games, and complete your intramural softball registration. All of these steps must be completed by 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, March 11th, in order for you to be included in intramural softball. This is prior to spring break, so make sure that you are not looking too far ahead to your spring break trip and you get your intramural softball registration completed. If at any times you have questions about intramural softball or anything related to intramural sports, please contact our office at 319-335-9292 or by email at intramural-sports@uiowa.edu. Thank you for your attention during this video, and good luck to you and your team this season.